If you saw this scene in a Hollywood thriller, you might call it a cliché. A group of the most powerful men in America boarding a private train car under the cover of night, using code names, traveling to a secluded island to secretly rewrite the destiny of the global economy. But this is not a script. This is history. And the man telling us the story is not a whistleblower, but one of the conspirators himself, Frank Vanderlip, the president of the National City Bank of New York. In his own autobiography, From Farm Boy to Financier, Vanderlip admits, and I quote, "I was as secretive indeed, as furtive as any conspirator. If it were to be exposed publicly that our particular group had got together and written a banking bill, that bill would have no chance whatever of passage by Congress." The date is November 22, 1910. The location, a railway station in Hoboken, New Jersey. 6 men board a private car attached to a southbound train. To the conductors, they are going on a duck hunt, but these men had never shot a duck in their lives. Among them was Paul Warburg, a partner at Kuhn, Loeb & Co., who carried a shotgun he didn't know how to use, simply to maintain the charade. They were led by Nelson Aldrich, the most powerful senator in Washington. Their destination? The Jekyll Island Club, off the coast of Georgia. For 9 days, this group lived in complete isolation. No journalists, no staff. Just 6 men who controlled a quarter of the world's wealth. What they wrote there, known as the Aldrich Plan, became the skeletal structure of the Federal Reserve Act of 1930. This video is not about conspiracy theories. It is an investigation into a documented historical event. The thesis we will explore is simple but disturbing. The financial system we live under today was not born in the open halls of democracy. It was engineered in secret by a private oligarchy who designed a system to solve a national crisis, while ensuring their own survival. To understand why these men hid on an island, we must first understand what they were running from. 3 years earlier, in 1907, the American economy had suffered a near-fatal heart attack. The New York Stock Exchange fell 50%. Trust evaporated. It was the panic of 1907. At that time, the United States had no central bank to act as a lender of last resort. The government was helpless. The country was saved not by Washington, but by one man, J.P. Morgan. Morgan literally locked the nation's sot bankers in his private library and refused to let them leave until they pledged their own money to bail out the system. The crisis exposed a fatal flaw in the American system: inelastic currency. In the fall, when farmers in the West needed cash for harvest, New York banks were drained. If a panic started then, there was no way to create liquidity. The money supply was rigid. It couldn't stretch. Enter Paul Warburg, the intellectual protagonist of our story. A German immigrant and partner at Kuhn, Loeb & Co., Warburg was shocked by the primitive state of American banking. He compared the U.S. system to a small town with no fire department, where people just prayed their house wouldn't catch fire. In his pivotal book, The Federal Reserve System, published decades later, Warburg details the technical solution he brought to Jekyll Island. He argued for a European-style central bank of reservoir of credit that could flow to where the fire was burning. But there was a problem: politics. Senator Nelson Aldrich knew that the American public hated the idea of a central bank. They feared it would be a tool for Wall Street tycoons. So the mission at Jekyll Island was paradoxical: to create a central bank that looked like it was anti-central bank. They avoided the name bank. They called it the National Reserve Association. Warburg provided the technical engineering, how the reserves would move, how the interest rates would be set. Aldrich provided the political camouflage. They weren't just fixing the economy. They were designing a cartel where they, the bankers, would control the currency, but the government would take the political heat. The plan created at Jekyll Island had a fatal flaw: the name on the cover. Nelson Aldrich was a Republican and a friend of J.P. Morgan. In the eyes of the American public, anything he touched was poison. When the Aldrich Plan was finally presented to Congress, it was dead on arrival. Then the political winds shifted. In 1912, Woodrow Wilson and the Democrats took the White House. They promised to break the money trust and oppose the Wall Street cartel. The bankers at Jekyll Island should have been terrified. Instead, they were preparing their greatest magic trick. The new Democratic bill, the Glass-Owen bill, appeared to be different. It promised government control, not banker control. But Paul Warburg, the architect, knew better. In private letters, he admitted it was essentially the Aldrich Plan in a new suit. The technical engine was identical. Only the paint job had changed to please the politicians. Now comes the masterstroke of reverse psychology. If Wall Street endorsed the new bill, the public would hate it. So, the conspirators decided to do the opposite. They launched a coordinated public attack against their own creation. Senator Aldrich publicly denounced the new Federal Reserve Act as socialistic and destructive. Frank Vanderlip gave interviews warning that it would ruin the economy. It was theater. Historians debate the extent of this coordination, but the effect is undeniable. By attacking the bill, they convinced the skeptical public and the populist politicians that the Federal Reserve Act must be bad for the banks. And if it was bad for the banks, it must be good for the people. The ruse worked. On December 23, 1913, 2 days before Christmas, while most of Congress had already left Washington for the holidays, the Federal Reserve Act was voted on and passed. Woodrow Wilson signed it into law that same day. The men of Jekyll Island had won. They had captured the exclusive right to create the nation's money, legitimized by the very government they sought to control. As Paul Warburg himself later wrote to a friend, "I am very happy. The baby is born." So, what is the legacy of that secret meeting? The Federal Reserve promised stability. And in many ways, it delivered. The constant, chaotic bank runs of the 19th century became rarer. The elastic currency Paul Warburg dreamed of is now a reality. The government can print its way out of almost any crisis, but every solution has a cost. Since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, the U.S. dollar has lost over 96% of its purchasing power. The ability to create money out of thin air is a power that even kings and emperors of the past never truly possessed. And that power was designed, structurally, by the very banks it regulates. Today, the Federal Reserve is often called the fourth branch of government. It is neither fully private nor fully public. It is a hybrid monument to the compromise struck in a smoke-filled room on Jekyll Island. History is not always written in public. The 6 men who boarded that train in 1910 are long gone. But the system they built, that invisible architecture of debt and credit that surrounds us every day, that is still very much alive. They went to hunt ducks. They came back with the world economy in their bag. I'm Bruno, and it has been a pleasure sharing this chapter with you. If you don't want to miss the next one, subscribe to Money Trail History.